What if a player who hasn't started a single regular season game was already worth more off the field than most starting quarterbacks are on it? Not a first-round pick. Not a franchise quarterback handed the keys to a team on day one. A fifth-round pick. Pick 144. The kind of selection that gets a 2-second mention on the broadcast before the network cuts to commercial and moves on to the next name. Now hold that image in your head, because the number that comes next is going to make you stop and reread it. $250 million in jersey sales. That number doesn't make sense on paper for a player still fighting for a starting job. And yet, here we are. Shedeur Sanders hasn't thrown a single regular season touchdown pass in the NFL, but he has already generated more jersey revenue than almost any rookie in the history of the league. The last time numbers like these showed up around a rookie? 1992, and the name attached to that moment? His father, Shedeur Sanders. That is not a coincidence. That is legacy meeting strategy in real time, and it is worth every minute of your attention. Before breaking down the money, the contracts, and the clauses that have front office executives quietly rethinking everything they thought they knew about rookie leverage, you need to understand how this story actually started, because the road to this moment is just as remarkable as the destination itself. Shedeur Sanders entered the 2025 NFL Draft as one of the most discussed quarterbacks in the entire class. His time at Colorado under his father's program was electric. He had the arm talent, the statistics, the pedigree, and, perhaps most critically, a brand that was already fully constructed before his name was ever called on draft night. Pre-draft projections had him going anywhere from the late first round to the mid-second round. Scouts had studied the tape. Front offices were paying attention. And Nike had already made their move. They signed him as the first football athlete in their Zero collection while he was still wearing Colorado colors, positioning themselves ahead of the draft like a team trading up before the board shifted. That wasn't a reactive decision. That was a calculated investment based on a conviction that Shedeur Sanders was going to be bigger than whatever round his name got called on draft night. Then came the draft itself, and something completely unexpected happened. Round 1 came and went. Round 2. Round 3. Round 4. And when the Cleveland Browns finally called his name, it was in the 5th round at pick 144. The room went quiet in a very specific kind of way, the kind of quiet that descends when something doesn't add up. Almost immediately, the takes started arriving in waves. Too focused on branding. Bad body language. Entitled. The same confidence that built his following somehow became evidence of a character problem the moment his draft stock slipped 5 rounds from where many analysts had projected. Those narratives didn't materialize from nowhere. Sources close to the situation suggested they felt coordinated, like multiple outlets reading from the same page. And when you understand what Shedeur brought to his contract negotiation, the reason for that coordination starts to make a very specific kind of sense. Here is the phrase that changes everything in this story: prime equity. Most rookie contracts follow a well-worn and deliberately simple structure. You get drafted, you sign a slotted deal based entirely on your pick number, and you collect your salary while the team holds virtually all the leverage over your professional future. The Cleveland Browns gave Shedeur Sanders a 4-year deal worth $4.6 million total. Solid for a 5th-round pick. Respectable by every standard measure. But almost completely beside the point now. Because buried inside that contract is a prime equity clause, and that clause is the precise reason this story is unlike anything the league has encountered before. What it essentially does is tie Shedeur's financial upside directly to his name, image, and likeness value. Merchandise sales, branded drops, sponsorship arrangements, limited releases, every dollar generated through his brand, he receives a percentage of. He is not simply an endorser collecting a flat fee. He is a stakeholder. He is operating less like a traditional athlete and more like a founding partner in his own company, with equity in the product he is actively building. The math, when you actually run it, is staggering. His rookie contract averages out to approximately $1.16 million per year. His cut from jersey sales alone is currently sitting at approximately $14 million, and that is before a single regular season game has been played. He has already earned roughly 3 times his entire rookie deal through merchandise revenue alone. 3 times. Without playing a single down that counts in the standings. For perspective, consider what that comparison looks like from the other side of the ledger. Cam Ward, another high-profile rookie quarterback from the same draft class, would need to move over 375,000 jerseys just to match his NFL salary. Shedeur would need roughly 35,000 over 4 years. He is currently on pace to clear that number like it barely existed. This is what made front offices uncomfortable. This is the root of why the character attacks accelerated after the draft slide. Because the old system, the one where rookies sit quietly, take their slotted money, and wait for the organization to decide their future, has no established answer for a player who has already restructured the financial equation before the season begins. Here is what separates this from your standard rookie endorsement headline: none of this happened by accident. Nike did not discover Shedeur Sanders after a promising preseason performance. They were not watching jersey numbers climb and scrambling to get in front of the story. They were already 3 steps ahead while the rest of the market was still debating where he would land on draft night. That Zero Collection signing was not a casual promotional arrangement, it was a deliberate, long-term investment in an athlete they had already determined would be bigger than his draft round. By the time the 2026 NFL season was approaching, Nike had the entire infrastructure ready. Custom cleats designed. Exclusive colorways prepared. A complete campaign built to connect his Colorado legacy directly to his NFL arrival in Cleveland, drawing a deliberate line from the Air Diamond Turf nostalgia of his father's 1992 era to a modern, social media native rollout engineered to reach a completely different generation of fans. Then draft night happened, he slid to pick 144, and Nike did not hesitate. They leaned in harder. They broke months of social media silence specifically to announce his arrival with the kind of energy brands typically reserve for top 5 picks. Poetry and motion campaigns. Platform-wide content floods. Targeted drops that kept him in the cultural conversation every single week during the offseason. And when Shedeur played his first preseason game against Carolina, Nike was ready before the final whistle. 14 completions. 138 yards. 2 touchdowns. Calm, composed, and efficient under pressure, exactly the production you need to see from a quarterback proving himself at this level. Within hours, Nike released an ad built directly around his signature watch celebration, with a caption that read simply, "Only a matter of time." That post generated 200,000 likes and millions of impressions within 24 hours. That is not routine marketing output. That is a coordinated cultural moment with a foundation already built. The brand was not being introduced to the public. It was being confirmed. All of the business architecture is compelling, but there is a locker room involved here too, and that part of the story deserves direct attention, because a significant portion of the noise surrounding Shedeur has attempted to suggest that his brand focus creates friction, that his priorities are misaligned with what a team requires from a developing quarterback. Here is what is actually being reported from inside the Cleveland Browns facility: players respect him. Not tolerate, genuinely respect the way he carries himself and the way he treats people within the building. He moves through the locker room treating everyone with the same level of regard, and in a competitive professional environment, that consistency is one of the fastest and most reliable ways to earn real credibility. Head coach Todd Monken has been direct about his philosophy from the beginning of this process. The players choose their leader, not the front office, not the coaching staff. The players. Because there is something that happens in NFL locker rooms that cannot be manufactured or assigned by an organizational chart. You either have the player who generates that dynamic, or you do not. The quarterback competition itself remains active. Dillon Gabriel is in the mix, and the preseason numbers tell a clear story: a passer rating of 66 compared to Shedeur's 106. The film supports the statistics. However, depth charts in the NFL do not always follow pure logic in the short term. Veterans, contracts, and organizational timelines all factor into decisions that unfold over the course of a training camp and preseason schedule. An oblique issue described as minor adds another variable, a reminder of how quickly every calculation in professional football can shift. When a player rises at this speed and with this visibility, the spotlight intensifies in every direction. And not every light being pointed is intended to illuminate. The speeding violations made headlines: 91 in a 65, and 101 in a 60. These are not decisions that reflect good judgment on public roads, and they were covered accordingly. But they were also covered with an intensity that veterans with far more serious situations have rarely encountered. What becomes a footnote for an established player becomes a character study when the name attached is Shedeur Sanders, because every detail surrounding him gets amplified by the volume of attention already focused in his direction. The language cycling through the coverage, entitled, unfocused, too focused on image, is the same language that circulated during the draft slide, the same framing that felt coordinated in April and continues to feel coordinated now. Shedeur's response to all of it has been the same throughout: silence. No public statements. No defensive social media posts. No counternarratives pushed through intermediaries. Just football, preparation, and production numbers that continue to accumulate. The more substantive question is why the volume on these stories remains so consistently high around a fifth-round pick. And the answer keeps returning to the same place: the prime equity clause. Because if a player drafted at 144 can structure a deal of this architecture and succeed with it on and off the field, that is a conversation every future highly marketable draft prospect is going to want to have at the negotiating table. That is leverage the existing system is not built to absorb widely. So discrediting the individual behind the model carries a certain strategic logic, even when the attacks themselves do not hold up under direct scrutiny. Jerseys are only the beginning of what is being constructed around Shedeur Sanders. Nike is not building a seasonal endorsement arrangement here. They are constructing a complete commercial ecosystem around a player they are treating less like an athlete on a contract cycle and more like a long-term cultural institution. The apparel rollout reflects that scope entirely. Kids' jerseys moving consistently. Women's cuts specifically designed to expand the market well beyond the traditional football buying demographic. Premium authentic Cleveland Browns jerseys priced at up to $175, and they continue to sell. Limited sneaker drops capped at 200 pairs, selling out almost immediately upon release. Graphic tees at accessible price points pulling in a completely different buyer from a completely different economic bracket. Times Square billboards featuring the watch celebration in one of the highest traffic advertising locations on the planet. Nike football social media engagement has reportedly quadrupled compared to their already strong established baseline. Influencers are sharing the content without being paid to do so. Sports media cannot step away from the story. Even competing brands are monitoring the trajectory closely. And the conversation is already moving to the next level. Insiders are reporting that a potential full-signature shoe line is in development, with working titles including LL2C and Proto 92 reportedly circulating within those discussions. If that launch materializes, this entire conversation scales to a fundamentally different category. A signature shoe is not an endorsement product. It is a declaration. It places Shedeur Sanders in a bracket occupied by the most culturally significant athletes currently active in professional sports. At that point, this stops being exclusively a football story and becomes something considerably broader. Here is the question that sits at the actual center of everything happening around Shedeur Sanders right now. Not whether he wins a starting job. Not whether Nike's investment generates the return they projected. The real question is, what happens next if this blueprint holds? Because right now, Shedeur is functioning as a one-player stress test on the NFL's existing power structure. Teams have held virtually all leverage over rookies for decades. They control contracts, development timelines, public narratives, and organizational decisions about when a player earns their opportunity. The prime equity model disrupts that arrangement in a fundamental way. It gives the player direct economic power tied to the value they generate, not the value the franchise chooses to assign through a slotted rookie deal. If Shedeur Sanders performs on the field and this financial architecture holds, the next generation of highly marketable draft prospects will walk into negotiations with entirely different expectations already established. Agents will be requesting prime equity clauses as a standard opening position. Players will be seeking percentage deals on their nil revenue before their first regular season snap. Front offices will be required to construct responses to a negotiating environment that no longer favors them the way it has for the past several decades. That is the shift. That is the actual reason there is this much noise surrounding a fifth-round pick from the 2025 draft class. It is not fundamentally about Shedeur Sanders the quarterback. It is about what Shedeur Sanders represents, the first documented crack in a structure that has remained locked since the modern NFL salary system took shape. Shedeur Sanders arrived in the NFL at pick 144, carrying a label that historically signals quiet development, clipboard time, and institutional patience. What he has delivered before his first regular season start is a complete reconfiguration of what it looks like to enter professional football with leverage already built. Before one regular season snap, he has generated $14 million in jersey revenue. He has secured what credible reporting describes as potentially the most significant rookie endorsement structure in NFL history. He has built a brand infrastructure that has Nike treating him as a decade-long institutional partner rather than a short-term promotional vehicle. And he has done all of it without issuing a single public response to every coordinated attempt to redirect the narrative. His preseason passer rating is 106. His primary competition is sitting at 66. The film supports the numbers. The locker room reflects the respect he has built. The coaching staff believes in the process. And Nike just placed him on a Times Square billboard. None of this guarantees a starting job in the NFL. None of it removes the work still directly ahead of him. The league does not distribute anything based on jersey revenue or social media impressions. On the field, performance is still the only currency that matters when the lights are at their brightest and the defenses are at their most sophisticated. But if Shedeur Sanders continues to perform, if the on-field production keeps pace with the platform he has already constructed, then the league is looking at something it genuinely has not encountered before. Not just a player succeeding against the expectations attached to his draft position. A player actively rewriting the rules of entry into the league, while playing by every rule already on the books. That is the blueprint. And every team, every agent, every brand, and every future draft prospect is watching closely to see whether it holds. If this story hit differently for you, if you believe Shedeur Sanders is genuinely rewriting what it means to be a rookie in the NFL, hit that like button right now and make sure you subscribe so you do not miss a single development as this story continues to build. We are tracking every move, every contract detail, every game, and every business development as it happens. This is only getting bigger, and we will be here when it does.